Welcome to the Silver Lining Podcast with Luke and Monica, episode 4.
And you'll notice if you're watching YouTube, I'm already seated because I have figured out a way to make sure the computer is like right here versus a mile away, so she couldn't get it before I got here. So
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah.
That's boring.
Yeah, no more racing and tripping over cords and cameras and all sorts of stuff that we have no idea what we're doing with. So we just swapped out from one camera to the next camera, and that didn't work. So anyway, for those of you who've ever done any version of podcasting or really any video, audio, you know the pain and suffering. So, pray for us, but most of all, pray for the cause. Today, in episode 4, we're going to flip the timer over, and we're going to see how closely we can stick to the timer. That was a joke. We're going to go until we shouldn't go anymore, and hopefully we know when that is. So today, we are going to be talking about a concept of something that really all Christians learn over time. I think that as you are trying to become more like Christ, there is this season you go through where you realize that you can absolutely be pleasing the Lord. You can absolutely be trusting the Lord. You can absolutely be at peace with the Lord, but you can be very uncomfortable with what God is challenging you with, what he's asking of you, maybe what he's asking for you to surrender, or ultimately. So sometimes God calls us into seasons that make no sense, and somehow we can still have peace in the middle of it. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Monica has a couple of journal entries that we're going to go back to from the season of life before she met me, really in a season that she didn't really know who I was, anything more than this is the guy who just lost his wife and she's watching the kids and family. And so I actually haven't heard these journal entries. So she has referenced them in the past. And when we connected initially and started talking and realized that God had done something in our lives to bring us together, she has referenced the journal several times, but made it clear that I was never allowed to read the journal. And so I don't know what was written about me. So if there's swear words or anything, just know I haven't been able to edit it ahead of time.
Raw footage.
Yes. So this is going to be the raw footage of really the first time. Is it the first time that anybody's seen these journal entries other than you?
Oh yeah, nobody but you would even know about them.
Okay, so well, we bring it to you. So for those of you that are very, very close to Monica and she hasn't told you her deep, dark secrets, just know that I heard them first here. Also, we can edit them out if we don't want them. So just, software. But we're talking today about the tension between when God makes you uncomfortable because you're living by faith and being challenged and being really tested in your faith, not to mess you up, but to strengthen your faith. And then ultimately the concept of also being at peace in that tension. And so I'd like at this point for Monica to read journal entry number 1.
Oh, we're jumping right into
it. So, well, I mean, it's the point of this whole thing. I'm excited. It's like Christmas morning. We're opening up presents.
I was expecting way longer of an intro.
Oh, well, I could elongate that, but who needs that? Let's hear. So she has 2 entries at different times. One that is supposedly either right before the funeral or right.
This is 8/13/23. So
this is Sunday.
This is Sunday, the day that Alicia went into the hospital.
Yeah. So we're still in the week of Alicia passing away when she writes this journal entry, and so this will be the first time I've heard it. So what was said? Obviously, it can't be that great because you didn't know anything about us. So,
well, it really wasn't all that much about you, to be honest. It was about where I was.
We'll praise Jesus for that. So,
okay. It says, "Dear Lord, my thoughts are dark. They've been dark the last couple of days, wondering why. Why is this my life? Why am I almost broke? I barely have enough money to pay my doctor's bills. I did not sleep much last night. I did not want to go to church and sing today, but I did, still in my heart and my mind wondering, why me? There's a young mom dying in the hospital today, and she needs a miracle to live. She has a husband and 4 kids, and here I am crying about being broke. If I had never met my ex-husband, I probably would have never gotten sick. I know you have a purpose in all this in my life. Please help me trust you. You say you will supply all my needs. I have food, water, a great place to live, great parents, a great job, a good boss. Lord, thank you for all the good things in my life. You have brought me through a lot. Help me to rest in what you said. You will never leave me nor forsake me. Please give me peace."
I look back on some of our lives and see the sovereignty of God at different points, and to realize that at this point we've been married for a year and a half, and a lot of the joy that we get to experience is the story that we get to live, and all the shenanigans and, bad boys and punks, as I refer to them. And, even tonight we gotta go with Jacqueline to her school thing, and she's talking and chattering and just messing with Monica, and she wanted Monica to take her on her own. Like, she wanted to take Monica on this thing. And there's just a lot of joy that we have in the life that we live, but a lot of the joy that we have, and even the reason, like, hey, why are we even doing a silly podcast to tell our story and talk about what God has done, is because what God has done is so beautiful. I feel like it would be inappropriate to not share what God has done in our life. But going back to this point, to hear a journal entry like that, where I know that at this point, this is what, Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening.
Sunday evening.
And, in my life at this point, Erin has arrived, Alicia's sister, and my brother James is now here. And, at this point, we're probably trying to wind down for the evening with no answers to one of the worst days in my life at that point, or up to that point. And having this confidence, looking back now and us talking, we've talked about different areas of our life that God had really synced up what we were going through. Because at this point in her life, she's asking hard questions of God that are hard for her to ask. Like, even the whole concept, like, hey, why am I broke? Why do I have hospital bills? Why, if I hadn't married my ex, I probably wouldn't have gotten sick, based on the past, which we haven't really gotten into a lot there, and we will do more. But just that concept that God was working at that point, and God had worked up to that point. And while both of our worlds seem to be falling apart in a different way, and it really, she summarized, it wasn't really falling apart. She's grateful
We're
for what
just
she has,
overwhelmed.
but just overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And I believe that sometimes you can be spot on in the will of God, and spot on in a place that is of God and for his glory and for your good, and be absolutely overwhelmed. And that's okay. People oftentimes will attribute their doubt of what they see or what they believe about God, and they'll feel guilty because they feel this doubt. And I want to just ask, like, obviously, your emotions at that point, and I know that it's not about me, and I do love that. It's really about Alicia at this point, where she's just worried about this mom in the hospital. And I think that it's an incredible perspective shift from her in her journal, which I think journaling is really valuable. I don't do it, but you should.
And it's, to be honest, I don't do it a lot. I started this in, let's see, July of that same year, 23. And the reason I started it is because I was overwhelmed. I was dating someone and I could not get peace about it. And so I just was like, okay, this will bring me peace if I can write my thoughts out. And I always do it in like a prayer. And like there's also several things in here where I wrote out just scripture, just wrote
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah, and that is a very healthy way to process things. We go in, like, the practical aspect of what she's going through at this time. God is, and we've talked about this a lot of this season in her life. So I can speak pretty confidently to that. She's like, man, did you write a journal? No, I didn't know what her journal looked like, to be fair. But
It was hidden.
it was hidden, yeah, all those dark secrets. But really, there's this concept where God is making her, not taking away her peace, but taking away her peace about certain situations. And I believe God will do that, where God will move in a way where he's going to disrupt your peace, not because he's removing his peace from your life. In the presence of God, there is peace. But in the circumstances that we sometimes go through, God's going to make us uneasy. And it's not a spirit of fear. So, like, it's not like she's fearful
No, I
at this
wasn't
time.
fearful.
Yeah. So in the presence of God, you shouldn't be living in fear, but faith oftentimes feels scary. I mean, depending on where you're at spiritually, faith can be absolutely terrifying as you're stepping in faith. And at this season, we'll talk a little bit more in our next podcast about just the concept of where sometimes God's going to use situations and people in your life where people are going to come and give you what they believe is sound advice. And they're good people, they're godly people, they're people that love you, that want what's best for you. But if God is speaking to you about something different that you're supposed to be doing or not doing, you're accountable to God, and you need to own that and to walk with the Lord and trust the Lord. even though that might potentially put you at odds with people that you love, the people that love you, and people that are godly. And you say, man, are you saying avoid godly counsel? It's our next podcast. We'll get there. And the concept is, no, we believe in a multitude of counselors are safety. We'll talk about that. But that doesn't mean that just what everybody says in your life is necessarily that you should take it at face value. You should be able to, as a spiritually mature person, be able to pray these things out. And God is not afraid of your hard questions. You look at Job. Job asks a bunch of questions of God. And before God answers any of those questions, God asks a bunch of questions of Job that really puts in perspective where Job is at. And actually, God doesn't answer a lot of those questions that Job asks him. But notice that it doesn't say that God was mad at Job for asking these hard questions, because Job was actually talking and bringing these to God. And so I want to just talk about the tangible aspect, because at this point in my life where she's journaling, at least she's in the hospital, I'm about to start a very unique journey of grief that I think I know a lot about, even though I absolutely, at the time, I had know nothing about. And even now I barely can scratch the surface of what I believe is out there when it comes to grief. But I do know this: when you are in a season where you're asking really hard questions of God because you are going through it, that doesn't mean that you don't love God. It doesn't mean that God doesn't love you. It just means you have questions. And sometimes the best thing you can do is ask God those questions, and to write it out, and write it out with scripture is a very, very wholesome way to be able to process what you're going through. But just understand, well, God's not afraid of your hard questions. He's probably going to ask you some hard questions. And it may not be an audible place where God starts talking to you, but it will be through his word, and will be through your experiences and what you're going through, where you're going to start maybe having your faith tested of the concept of, do you trust me anyway? Right? Do you trust who you know of me in the past to take you through to what you don't know in the future? And it's a challenge for us, because there is that tension of, well, this is really uncomfortable. This faith, what God's asking me to do and what God's bringing me through, is not fun. Well, the Christian life was never promised to be fun. God doesn't say that you're going to get saved and he's going to fix all your problems and life's going to be fun. He does make a commitment that he'll be with you no matter what. They'll never leave you or forsake you. And you need to lean on some of those promises, and there'll be joy. But joy does not come in a perfect set of circumstances. Joy comes in the presence of Jesus.
Right. Because in this world, we will have troubles.
Yeah, and yea, and all who live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. We live in a broken world, so don't be surprised when the broken world shows up at your doorstep. It's, why are we surprised? And so being able to look at that and say, okay, I can step forward in faith and be absolutely dismayed, if you would, in despair, but not because God's not good and God's not there, but because he's growing your faith in this process. And he was doing that for Monica. He certainly was doing that for me at this point. And we'll talk about more of that in a minute. But I want to ask this question. What did peace look like in that moment? Because I know it's a lot of, overwhelmed sense of just like screaming inside potentially. What did peace look like in that moment? Or did it feel absent?
No, it wasn't absent. It was just having to remind myself what I was grateful for, because there was so much that I could be grateful for. But like we've said before, you have to choose to see that. Like, you have to choose to be grateful and thankful for what you do have, because I had a lot to be grateful for. I was just overwhelmed by bills and the fact that I was 34 and divorced and living with my parents again, and I never dreamed that would happen. So no, there was peace.
Well, I believe that we all have to come to a place where sometimes the identities in which we are picking up. So I believe we go through life picking up these different identities that are not from God, but they are given to us by others or even ourselves, where we get this concept of like, well, I'm 34 and divorced and living with my parents. All of those are identities that she picked up. And while they're true, like they're factual, yes, she was living with her parents. They kind of liked it, and I'm sure they would take her
Yeah,
back.
because it could have been worse.
Yeah.
Because I knew a girl who got divorced and had nowhere to go because she didn't have parents.
And we can be so grateful for Monica's parents and them pouring out into her life during that time and being understanding, and just there's just a lot that's there that that when you're grateful, you can change your whole life with a
Oh, yeah.
perspective shift. And sometimes the circumstances around you of other people going through some stuff will give you a complete perspective shift. It's amazing how you kind of be going through your own pity party of like, oh me, oh my, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this. And then somebody walks in who's going through a whole lot worse. And suddenly you're like, I got it pretty good. I can do this,
Yeah,
right?
and that's exactly
Yeah.
what I was thinking Sunday when I went to church. Like, I didn't wanna go to church that day, and I certainly didn't wanna be in choir singing and being happy, and then I get done singing and sit down, and then they start talking about Allie Thornton, how she's in the hospital, and I was just like, "Wow, well, my life could be a lot worse."
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Um, I think she just answered this question. You're in a scenario where you're in a state, if you would, where you're not, it's not where you want to be.
mhm,
It's actually where you don't want to be. But I will say this, it's not like you knew where you wanted to be. You just knew you didn't want to be
right.
in that state, broke and medical bills and having recovered from cancer. And so this is I think you answered about, were you angry or confused with God or just numb? Like what's the emotion that you're feeling? So obviously you have the peace. So obviously we don't sense anger.
It wasn't angry, I wasn't numb, it was more like, "Lord, you've brought me through all of this, so there has to be a purpose." Like, I don't think God took Job through all of that and he
Yeah.
lost everything for no reason, and I was looking for the reason. That's where I was. I wanted a reason, like, who's this gonna help?
Yeah. Um, I think I mentioned it in our last podcast, the song "Scars," and talking about
Mm,
it just is it's a beautiful song, but
I sent you that.
oh, absolutely, yeah, I had never heard this song
It's a very good song.
before we started talking and realizing that God had done some stuff in our life prior to, and so it's a really beautiful song, and I'll try to remember to post it in the notes. If you wanna look there, it might be there, it might
I'll
not be.
remind you
Yeah, yeah.
because it's a good
Yeah.
song.
And there's just a part of that song where it talks about God using, and it's just a prayer that, like, I'm thankful for these scars because without them, I wouldn't know your heart. But then
Mm,
it talks about how God, these scars are a story that you'll use. And I want to talk about God using the scars because a lot of our podcast is going to be going back and talking about some different scars that have happened prior to us and our story. And some of them are self-inflicted scars. They're our own decision, our own consequences of our decisions. And sometimes the scars you go through, they're not scars from you didn't earn those scars, right? They're yours, and they might have been inflicted, and it might feel like they were inflicted by other individuals. And I want to just kind of touch on this. God is going to use those scars, but you get to be a part of how he uses them, meaning that I have been at points in my life where I didn't want God to use my scars because I didn't want to show my scars. I didn't want people to see my scars or see, the consequences of my poor decisions or poor leadership or poor whatever, poor walk with the Lord, whatever it is, right? And in the meantime, God's going to get the most glory if you just surrender them to him, because what God can do with your surrender is so much more than what you can do with whatever you're holding on to. And sometimes we cover the scars, or we don't even let those scars heal. We kind of bury them and just try to pretend like they're not there, but they're sometimes the best way for a scar to heal is actually to be able to be cleansed. And in the cleansing process, you remember as kids we'd get different scars or whatever, different wounds, and we get out the hydrogen peroxide, and it was like we had gallons of hydrogen peroxide in our family. And I think we have let's talk about hydrogen peroxide real quick.
It expires after 6 months of opening.
Yes, good information. In fact, that's information that I didn't know prior to last week, just to throw that out there. So when all the hydrogen peroxide was suddenly out of the house, I was like, where did the hydrogen peroxide go? And she's like, well, it expired. I'm like, this stuff doesn't expire.
I was like, "You chat GPT that."
Yeah, and I did. And turns out she was right and I was less right. And actually I was 100% wrong. I didn't know that hydrogen peroxide expires. And anyway, so that was why we didn't have any, and so she got me some more.
It's
But
okay, I bought you more.
yeah. And she'll throw that away within like 6 weeks. I assure you. So just in case we get to 6 months, right? Um, there's I think there's two kinds of people in the world. There's those that look at expiration dates and throw things out about 6 weeks early, and then there's those people who don't believe in expiration dates, and then they marry each other.
Oh, that's the
And
truth.
it's just
So true.
it's the people. It's the same concept of people that the way that people handle leftovers. Like for me, I understand. Leftovers last about a week and a half before they're even close to.
Not if you
They might
Google
not.
it.
No, they might not be good. Well, it's how I grew up. Like, it's, how I have such a strong immune system, right? But
2 to 3 days.
yeah, and like literally 24 hours after it's put in the fridge, it's gone. I'm like, well, where'd the good food go? She's like, oh, it expired. It's done. But you go through these times in life where you get these different wounds, and even with your kids, like I remember, Jacqueline at one point, learned how to ride a bike and scabbed herself up, and we try to clean up the wound, and there's this like terrifying thing of like, oh no, please don't clean that wound, right? And I'm like, I don't think we understand how much, if you don't clean out the wound, how much more painful that's going to be when it gets infected. And sometimes we let our scars get infected. I will say this, God is still going to find a way to get the glory in your scar, but he can get more glory by a cleaned, healed scar than I say you get more glory. That is actually not biblical. He's going to get the glory. It's just, there is a process in which a healed, clean scar is going to bring a different version of glory to God than necessarily a festered, wounded one, and some of the damages that can cause prior to you. It's still going to be cleaned, or you're going to lose your limb. But allowing God to do the work, understanding that it's going to hurt either way, it's just going to hurt a whole lot less if you surrender it sooner than letting it fester and having to clean it and still let it heal later. That makes sense. So, yeah. So as we're going to walk through this. The concept is peace while it hurts, meaning that you can be going through some mental anguish, even mental health, some depression or anxiety. Like, these are things that every human is, I would say, prone to, like, has the capability of dealing with. And there's a lot of, this isn't a mental health podcast, so if you need mental health support, go get that. But there's emotions that we as humans are going to go through, and your emotions that you're going through are not always unbiblical. They don't put you in a place like, sometimes you're like, I feel like I'm in despair. Well, that's not a sin. It's just something you've got to process, and you got to process why, and understand this is that it's a spiritual warfare, but your despair is not, where God's like, well, how dare you not trust me? My kids oftentimes will be at, Luke Lyle, even now, for some reason, he has this thing about food. And he's not overweight. He doesn't like to eat a lot, but he just always has to be aware of where the next meal's coming from. And I've never not fed him. Like, I've never, like, in all of his life, he's always had access to food. And there's just, for some reason, there's some stuff, and maybe his sibling stole his dinner. I don't know, but there is even tonight, we were literally on the verge of making dinner tonight. And he walks in and says, Dad, can we have this for dinner tomorrow night? As if to kind of to pre-order and pre-schedule. Now, we have cereal on the can. We've got all sorts of stuff. There's always food. But this thing of, and I'm not offended by the fact that he wants to make sure he has food. But I'm always laughing. I'm like, dude, I got you, man. You don't got to worry about that. And I wonder how much our Heavenly Father's like, hey, I've got you. I'm gonna provide for you. Why is this something you're constantly worried about? And I don't think God is asking us why, but I do believe that it might be something to challenge us. Like, is God asking us things in our questions that we need to answer? And those answers are going to change the perspective of what we're going through, and ultimately lead us to a deeper relationship and a deeper faith with him. So even peace while it hurts. The peace of God doesn't erase pain, but it does guard your heart through it. Philippians 4:6-7 says this. It says, be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ, and your minds through Christ Jesus. So, the concept of peace, and we talked about our youth pastor preaching recently, even before that, he preached a message on peace, and it was really powerful. But he was using this verse where literally peace guards your heart. The God of peace and the peace of God guard you, and they protect you, but only if you're letting him, and only if you're in the presence of God. Only if your peace only comes from God. True peace only comes from the God of peace. So we have this concept that while we're going through all this turmoil, that we protect our peace. You don't. It's the peace of God, and God is guarding you with it. And so we do coping things. So we do things that we try to bring to the table to protect our peace. And sometimes it's in the form of boundaries, and sometimes it's the form of of different coping mechanisms and shows that we watch, or the entertainment, or the reels, or what we're reading, or whatever it is, our music, right? And we think that we are protecting our peace by like, well, I'm just going to protect my peace. And you're not actually protecting your peace. You're protecting yourself. God guards you with his peace, and in his presence is peace. But don't be confused that you bring your peace. Your peace is only from God. And I know I'm stepping on some toes there of some people who may not believe that, but the God of peace and the peace of God, that's where you get true peace. So
But I do think there are things that you can do. Like, I remember when we started talking, I had come out of this, not really come out of, but just this, I was in this season of where, like, I was only listening to Christian music. I was reading my Bible, and if it didn't work once, I was reading it multiple times a day, or I had verses that I would constantly repeat over and over to myself, because I think there are things that we can do if you're, meditating on his word day and night, that will help you with that, versus if you're just only
yeah,
if you're only watching worldly shows, and you're only listening to worldly music, and you're only listening to friends with worldly opinions, then that's really not going to help you.
yeah, but I think the concept here is, what does listening to godly music or spirit filled music, what does that do for you? It brings you closer to God.
Mm,
What does meditating on the scripture and leaning on his word and repeating or rereading his word, or being in the proximity of people that are speaking Jesus into you versus whatever else opinion that they want, or all of that should bring you closer in proximity to the God of peace. And I believe that even that is a part of God's protection for you, because I believe music is very, very powerful. And by the way, I love like all music. Like I love Phantom of the Opera music. I love a lot of music. We have a whole PlayStation. We have a whole music station on Spotify. That's our music. And I'll be honest, it's not worship music for Sunday morning. It's like a bunch of country songs, like our love songs that we
mhm,
shared back and forth and stuff. I think that that's healthy for our relationship. But if I want to draw closer to Jesus, that's not the station I turn on. I have a different station called Grief and Worship that is my go-to songs of faith that have really got me through it. Right. And if I want to draw closer to God, that's the Spotify the station that I listen to. And I do believe there's things in our life that draw us closer to God, and there's things in life that maybe take us away from God. And you need to be able to discern that difference in maturity.
right.
And this was a stage of life where Monica's in a state of not turmoil, but potentially turmoil, not because there's not peace, but because there's not peace in the specifics of where she's like, hey, this is the direction that I'm being counseled to go, and I'm not feeling a peace about that. I'm feeling a peace in the separation from that. That's where you need to trust God, and knowing that, hey, am I listening to what I should? Am I listening to who I should? Am I reading what I should? Am I meditating on what I should? Well, if that's where your heart is, then you know that disruption is probably from God, and you need to pay attention to it. Versus if you're just willy-nilly doing whatever you want, listening to whatever entertainment that's out there, and getting a lot of feedback from a bunch of people who don't love Jesus and don't necessarily know God and counsel, don't be surprised if you're confused. But understand this: God is not the author of confusion.
Exactly.
So if you're confused in that state, check your sources, check your inputs, because potentially your confusion, well, I say potentially, your confusion is not from God, because while faith is going to demand faith of you, right? God's not in the business of making things confusing. But He will tell you what the next step of faith is. Faith may not have clarity to it, but it will be clear that it is of faith. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I don't want to be confusing myself or you or anybody else. So easy for me to do.
Yes.
Inconceivable. So you can still be falling apart and still falling apart externally, and still be held together internally. And we've talked a little bit about that, just different places in our life where the world around you seems to be in utter chaos, but what God is doing in you is so clear, not because there's always this, oh, I'm just half asleep singing lullabies. No, but because I trust the Savior. I trust the one who's leading me through it. So the concept of Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll feel no evil, right? Fear no evil. The shadow of death is pretty scary. It's still scary whether I'm with Jesus or without Jesus, but I trust the person I'm with, because his rod and his staff, they comfort me. It's not because there's not things to be terrified in the valley of the shadow of death. It's because in the presence of Jesus, I'm comforted by his presence, by his protection, and also the concept of the rod and the staff. You have the rod for correction and the staff for protection. I can trust that he's going to keep me in the line. I can trust he's going to keep people out of my line. And that is a piece that I can absolutely lean into in his presence. But without that presence, there's a lot to be afraid of out there. And you need to be mindful of that. So,
Mhm.
all right, are you ready for number two?
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to prompt number two here. I believe the dates on this one are.
They are 9, 10, 23.
So we, at this point, this is a month, just less than a month after Alicia's passed away. You know, the kids have gone to school, and she's going to read this and she's going to talk about where she was at this point. And then I'm going to touch base just briefly on where I was at this point, just because we're both going through a season of looking for purpose, but really looking for, yes, she just had to flip over our time thing that we've been watching very closely so that we could flip it
I
over.
don't think you were watching it. To flip it over? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so true.
Anyway, so this is actually prior to us meeting. So she's writing this this journal prompt, and we'll talk a little bit about her spying on us and stuff. So yeah, no, just kidding. So, go ahead.
Okay. It says, this is me praying. Okay, so I'm going to pick up kind of in the middle of me praying. It says, Luke Sorensen has been on my mind a lot lately. Why is that? He came to the first service this morning, and I saw him and his 4 kids sitting and awaken. Please comfort them as they grieve the loss of Allie. Please help Luke as he continues to care for the kids all by himself. Please help them as they have started school with no mom to care for them. Luke's faith is very attractive to me. I want to be with someone that has faith like that. But Lord, you know how I feel about kids. I don't want them and I don't like them. I don't know why all of this is in my heart. I wanted to say hi to Luke this morning, but he doesn't know me, and I thought that would be weird.
Wow.
Okay, so then this next part is about about the guy that I was dating before, or actually was dating
Yep.
him at this time. I lost my spot. Where did I
Long
go?
distance relationship.
Yes, long distance relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says the guy I was dating, his days off are changing to Sunday and Monday. A long time ago, I would have been happy about that so we could go to church together. What if you have someone else for me and he moves here? I have a lot of questions, Lord, and no answers. So in the season of waiting, I will serve and wait on you for the next steps. Lord, please give me peace while all of this unfolds. Oh, I should back up here because this whole seeing Luke in the coffee shop with the kids were sitting at a table, and Luke, we have like these high tables at the Awaken, and there was 4 chairs, and so the kids are sitting down and Luke is standing up. I look up and he took a spoon and licked it and put it on his nose, and all of the kids are like giggling and laughing, and it was almost like I was, wow, Lord, just to watch the fact that I have been praying for them, and here they are, happy and loving Jesus. And it was like I could see the answers to my prayers, that God would give you guys peace. It was the
Yeah.
answer to my prayer. It was just, I don't know, it was just a very impactful day. And in my mind, I was like, oh, he's funny. Like,
Well, it's something to laugh at anyway. You know, that stage in our life, and I think there's a lot there in the journal entry that we could talk about, but I really think it speaks for itself. There's a state of, hey, when you're asking questions, God's asking you to live by faith in an area where you've been dating a really awesome guy. And I'll say this, and if the individual that you were dating ever watches this, all I can say is thank you, because I know that there was a tremendous love and sacrifice and just a a gentleness and tenderness that got Monica to a place where she was able to move past her ex-husband and move past some other things, and also realize that she wasn't avoiding love necessarily, but she was very clear on what she wanted in a husband. And I say this with the utmost respect for that individual. He really broke through some barriers that made it possible for her and I to connect deeply and quickly when we did start talking, which was not that Sunday because she was avoiding me. I had barely just acknowledged her existence in this kind of passing, and she it was during this Sunday. Sunday mornings were very, very difficult for me. Alicia passed away on a Sunday morning, and there was just a heaviness that came with Sundays. And a lot of times on Saturday night, I would stay up late writing. I wrote a lot and trying to compose poems and just come up with stuff and just content and write about Alicia and the grief I was feeling. And there was just a lot, and there still is a lot. The grief is different now, but it's not as well. And so Sunday mornings were extremely difficult. And so we the week before had been Alicia's birthday, and we were very grateful because we had Aaron and Wes had come up and spent the day with us, and we just had some good time with the kids. And they just served me and the kids, clean the house and organize the fridge and just all this stuff. And then Uncle Wes with the kids, he's just incredible with the kids. And I'd gone and taken a nap, and I woke up and the house is just rambunctious. Just they're just crazy. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of joy, a lot of laughter in our house that weekend, and some tears too. And so the next weekend is this weekend where she's journaling about this, but I had realized that I'm like, we have two worship services at our church. And I realized that if I went to the first service, I could also go to the second service. And to me, there was no real reason for it other than it was a lot of peace and comfort. And it's the same songs. It's the same service. It's not like one service is different than the other. I mean, it is a little bit different because, the people that come to the late crowd are totally different than the crowd that comes to the first crowd. But for me, it was just worship service. And very quickly, God allowed me to be in the worship service consistently, where it was a place where I could serve inside the worship service. And that was a sacred time for me where a lot of times that ended up with me in tears just because God was moving in my life and God was teaching me how to trust him without seeing the purpose and without seeing all the reasons. And yes, we saw some sovereignty, and yes, we saw beauty from the ashes, but a lot of this was just this: God, what are you asking me to do? Because right now I just feel like the single guy that just lost his wife, and now I have, these 4 kids, and I have no idea who I am right now other than I'm just yours. And that was God saying that purpose is not as important as relationship for me. And that was a very spiritual thing. So being able to be there, and so Sunday mornings we'd go there, and it was like our tradition. We'd get hot chocolates for the kids, and try to be on time for church and have kids with the buttons. Just we've gone to church all of our life with the kids. So this isn't new, but going to an early service and juggling stuff, it was without any support from Alicia stuff. It was just something that was real to us at the times. So being at that stage of life where the kids are really handling things well, there's a lot that I can learn from with that during that time. But really, God had blessed me with resilient children who chose to see a lot of what God had done. And even now, we were in the car the other night with Logan and her dad, and we were going out, and so it was just the kids and her dad and me. And Logan just unprompted says it. He's like, I'm so glad that mommy's in heaven.
Wow.
Yeah, and Poppy hears this, and I'm just like, okay, what, where, and just sometimes I just listen and play these out, let them talk it out, and I'm like, okay, interesting. Why would you say that? And this is him, joyful spirit. They're laughing, and he's like, well, she gets to be with Jesus right now, and she is out of pain, and she just is just in the happiest place ever. So I miss her a lot, but I am really, really happy that she's in heaven right now. And I don't think you get that. Like, that is a gift from God to me, almost more than it is to him, to be able to have your children know and be at peace. But I strongly believe it's because the many who prayed for the healing and the processing. And you can talk to my kids anytime you want about Alicia. They love to talk about Alicia. They love to talk to Monica about Alicia, who didn't ever get to meet Alicia. But one of the most beautiful things that they'll be able to tell you is exactly where Alicia is and what she's doing right now, which is worshiping Jesus. And they have a very healthy perspective of, this is okay. We don't need to know why. We don't even need to ask, but we can trust that God knows why, and we can trust him in this time.
It's crazy. On the way home, I was thinking, after reading these journal entries, I was asking, God, like, why would you take me through all of this? And I don't see a purpose in this at all. And then months later, it's like, wow, I had cancer, and so did Alicia. And so there's just a connection there, even with just the kids, because I
Oh yeah.
also had cancer, and just there was my why.
Oh
I
yeah.
just
Well, and it's interesting. This is a random fact, and for the sake of time, we'll wrap up in a second and go into our next podcast. And there's so much more, but we wanted to share, and really for me to hear those journal entries. Wow, that's like I knew it was God, and I knew there was God working, but there's so much there that's clarity wise. I don't know what to say about it, but even one small thing is that Monica, with her cancer journey, she had to have a medical port put in for the treatments, right? I didn't even know that was a thing, but Alicia had the same port, right?
Mhm.
So for the kids to be mindful of Monica's port
Yep.
as they're tackling her and stuff, they were very mindful of it before. So for them, there's like this connection of Monica understands what it's like to go through what mommy went through to a certain level, and obviously even a much more difficult level of cancer because it's a different cancer. But those little things that God, it's not just trauma bonding. I think someone said that when they were telling me that I need to be real, real cautious of my relationship with Monica. They're like, well, you're just trauma bonding. No, there was some things that God aligned our past to prepare us to get to the place that we are. And while I can miss Alicia and grieve Alicia tremendously and really not know why God did that and took Alicia, I can also see the sovereign hand of God healing Alicia, answering our prayers in that area, and then having already prepared Monica for our family. And you heard it here. We probably should talk about it. She says, I don't like kids. I don't want kids. So obviously, Luke Sorensen is not the guy for her. And then over time, God changes her heart. And now she's
Which
married to
only
me.
he could do.
Which only he could. I was going to make a joke about you still not wanting kids, but then you married one. So, but really, only God could do a work like that. And what is hilarious, and it's I guess ironic, is the people in her life that knew her also never would have put us together in a situation because she had such a perspective on what she wanted, and she wasn't going to have kids and all that stuff. And now she has 4 kids and almost 5. And that's not an announcement. So I was pointing to self. Almost 5 means I am her 5th child. For anybody who's
I'm
thinking,
glad that you
yes,
clarified that because
well,
that could be really
I
confusing
didn't
if you're
think about that
not
on you.
watching.
For those of you not on YouTube, I was waving to myself as her almost 5th child, not anything else. But the beauty of what God has pulled from the ashes is there's still ashes. There's still sorrow. There's still grief. There's still pain. There's still a lot of the tension between God, why? Why would you do this? I don't understand. And the beauty of, oh, that's why. There's a video out there. If you ever watched The Big Bang Theory, you've got Sheldon, who's this genius person, and I don't recommend the show, but there's just this clip of Sheldon, and he's like reading an instruction manual for something, and he's like, why? And he flips the page. He's like, and why? And it's just like annoyed of what's in there, and then he flips the page. He's like, oh, that's why, right? And it's very much like our life works that way sometimes, where it's the why I don't understand. This doesn't make sense. Like, God, what are you doing? Do you even care? Do you even love me anymore? And then there's this, oh, yeah, sorry about that, God. And what is beautiful is I believe that there is the fatherly Abba Father aspect of he's like, yeah, I got you. I got you. It's okay. And not only is he okay with the fact that we come back and say, hey, okay, we were wrong, but I think he's absolutely okay with the fact that we don't understand in the process how patient he must be with me in my constant doubting and my actions that prove my doubt, and the constant, it's okay. My grace is sufficient for thee. My grace is enough. And that's what I'd say as we wrap up this podcast, is that, hey, there's a tension between the faith of following after God and the uncomfortability of knowing that I am at peace because I'm in the presence of God, but in the middle of maybe the chaos around me, and knowing that God is still working. God has not abdicated his throne. He is still sovereign. He's still king, and he still loves you just as much on the days that you doubt as he does on the days that when you are 100% sold out and there's no question. The love of God does not change. Your closeness to him might, but the love of God does not change. And he's faithful today and yesterday and for eternity. Anything else?
Nope.
No. All right. We'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for following. We appreciate the encouragement. We realize that there's more than 2 listeners. Sorry, Mom and Dad. We have 3. Hannah, we see you. Michael, we got you. So we want to say thank you so much for those that are sharing the content. We believe that God has used and we'll use our scars and some of our story and your scars that God is going to use them for his glory. And it's something that he's going to use in spite of us and despite us, but use in a way that is, how I say it, disproportionate to who we are. So if you are confused by the purpose of the podcast, just know that this is his story and we just get to be a part of it and sing his song. And we're grateful for that. So we'll see you next time.
Bye.